Hello.
Ripley. Oh, here.
Hello. We're audio.
Melodic.
Hello. Oh.
This is supposed to be melodic, but you want filter, you want reverb, less reverb. Hello.
Yo, happy birthday. We're here at Xpizza with all of our friends. We're here with Ripley. We're here with Joey. Here with Johnny. Whole crew. I said Ripley first, I think. Okay, so I wanted to talk about radical approaches to conflict in an age of distress. But lately today I've been thinking about image suppression, so which is sort of on topic. It's like an approach to doxing or approach to technology would be to suppress your image. And so I wrote this little thing about image suppression, how to remove your image from the internet. Image suppression, a market has been created. Companies take our image and brand us. Once our image is taken and put up online, we no longer have control or ownership over it. We've been manipulated, thinking being seen will help us be heard. This manipulation has created a whole market for lawyers and security hackers who are able to suppress information. A lawyer at a law firm specializing in defamation will charge a retainer fee of $3K a month with a commitment of 12 months, so that's about $3,600. You can probably talk them down to a low end of 1,800. But yeah, so basically what they'll do with that money is they will work with SEO trackers to create new information that will suppress old information. So essentially you're paying for a service to generate more content. It's just, yeah, it's like content creation.
Content on content.
Yeah. But I also realized that we can remove our image for free. You can remove your image from the internet or you cannot remove your image from the internet just like you can change the past. So the only thing you can do in the present is to just not put your image out there. And over time, old information will be suppressed until irrelevant and no longer searchable. And I compared it to a dead body decomposing. Yeah.
So, maybe you've heard this before. This rumor that Walt Disney's head is frozen, right? Have you heard about this? So, there's allegedly they created Frozen the movie to bury that you can't search if you search Walt Disney Frozen head or you're not going to find it. It's completely buried by the movie. You'll never get to it. So like that was kind of like that. Then they were like, okay, we'll just get rid of it by making a movie called Frozen, and you can't search it anymore. And it's like they'll bury the rumor. You understand? They made the movie to cover up the myth that Walt Disney's head is frozen somewhere. So they're like, let's make a movie called Frozen. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I know all of this because I had talked to a law firm trying to figure out options on how to get rid of information. And then I just started Googling myself and teaching myself how to use SEO. I think they're called SEO. And it's basically like, yeah, and there's like, you use like Google Console. I don't really remember. But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't. Not a lot of thoughts on image suppression, like in the most literal sense, but the, just from the perspective of, someone who, this is Ripley, runs a print magazine and is like, one of the reasons why I decided to do that was um, the state of like Instagram specifically, and the pressure. I had worked at a lot of other magazines. There's a lot of pressure to like generate as much content as possible to drive sales. Sometimes that's subscription. Sometimes that's ad clicks, and also my experience on OnlyFans and making porn, feeling like this really intense competitive nature to like have your numbers be really high, and by that like put out a bunch of shit. It's like really stressful. People who do that for a living, that's like there's a huge impact on your mental health. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do print was like it's on your own timeline, and also it it allows us to kind of like exist in a space outside of content creations and the like repression. Like, right, so there's image suppression, which is what you're talking about, which is like removing or like kind of suppressing your own image. But then there's also the repression that happens on these platforms, right? Like we were just talking with Joey outside about, are you allowed to put your nipples out on Instagram? And there was a whole thing. There was like one day where they were like, they're letting nipples be out. Oh, now they're only letting people with mastectomies show their nipples. And it was like, okay, so like trans masculine people can like have their nipples out, but like if you have implants, you can't, like, so it just like creates all of these further divisions, right? So one of the reasons why I was like, print, you don't need to think about that stuff. I was like, I don't even want it, like, for a long time I was like, I only want pictures of the physical magazine. I don't want to like upload the file. And so yeah, so I think that there's like a lot of layers to it, because when we talk about image suppression, we're talking about a response to the way that the platforms and the algorithm and ultimately like this matrix of domination, which is like kind of emerged from the web, but it also existed before. It was interesting to watch the Pamela Anderson documentary, because she talked a lot about, she would, I would say like her and like Monica Lewinsky are probably like the first really public facing women to like have experienced certain types of doxing, and like to have her and her son talk publicly about like what it means to have like participated in something in a private setting, and that like being forced into the public, and thus like, all of these questions of consent come up, right? Where like, even though that's such a flawed concept, because it's so temporal. Like you can feel one thing in the moment and then something else later. Obviously, she put out she had privately filmed herself and her like partner having sex in a public space, and then all of a sudden, like when she was in deposition, the people who were like interrogating her were saying like, well, have you ever like been paid for a sex act? And she's like, no. And then they like started citing all of her Playboy photo shoots, saying like, well, isn't being photographed naked a sex act? And she was like, no. and they were like, oh, you've never been paid for sex? Well, like, what about all of these things? And she's like, that's different. And also, so it just like brings up this thing where it's like, okay, here's this example, this very, very public and almost like first example of the circulation of an image. And then there was an instance within that where they tried to, it was being circulated, and there was a question of whether or not she had been working with Hugh Hefner in Playboy, and she who was in direct competition with Penthouse, and I forget his name, he's a total shithead. The editor-in-chief of Penthouse was like basically like, I'm gonna one-off Hugh and like print pictures of his girl in my magazine. So he took stills from the sex tape and printed them in the magazine. And there was a whole question of like, who owned it? Well, Larry actually did Hustler, but that's a different, yeah, Larry wouldn't do that. But I'm like, I go hard for Larry. But yeah, so anyway, I feel like it's just a really interesting example of both of these things, right? Like the rise of an image, and then like sometimes the impossibility, even if you have all the power and resources that you want, to not be able to like, there was a question of like, oh, well, you could just like sell the rights to your image to a porn company and be making money off of this tape. And they refused to do that. They were like, no, because that legitimizes the fact that this thing was stolen from us. So anyway, I just thought that was like a really specific and interesting example of like the failure, or like before these tools were really available, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I have to watch that. I don't really know much about Pamela Anderson. Pamela Anderson. Yeah. But yeah, I guess that was the image suppression was a bit off topic, but it was something that I wanted to bring up. Another thing is something that I've been thinking about is basically like how to help, like when you're going through a crisis or you're going through extreme forms of alienation, and usually when that's happening, like you don't have friends or community. Like the whole thing with like doxing, for instance, is like you're being completely alienated from the people around you. And I was thinking about how like ways to survive a crisis, like oftentimes like are connected to money. Like like I gotta go to therapy. I don't know how everyone is, but like my therapist costs $175 a session. I can only see her twice a week. I wish I could see her every week, but I can't. Psychiatry, even like going to the gym. People are like, oh, like go to the gym, serotonin. Like that's a gym membership. That's probably 65 to I don't know, like 150 a month, depending on where you're at. But how much is a Blink membership? Wait, really? Oh. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can run outside too, but it's like, how are you going to even get out of the house, if it's not worth living, right? There's suicide hotline, that's free. But yeah, I was just thinking about like ways of, ways of like dealing with crisis that aren't tied to finances, and I kind of just want to talk about that. But also I want Joey to introduce himself because I'm just getting to know him, and he's a photographer, and I don't know much about his work, and I think it explores this topic.
Yeah, so I'm Joey Cochran. Oh shit, I don't use mics much. Yeah, I'm Joey Cochran. I've been practicing photography now for about 10 years, and originally I was making the work to cope with displacement in my life. I've been an at-risk kid all my life, and the work kind of overtook all that, gave me a peace of mind, and eventually it led me to making work on 4 different continents before coming back here. And before I get into crisis and things like that, one thing on image suppression, and this might be a bit pointed, but whatever. When I began to teach myself photography, because I didn't study in school or anything like that, when I began to teach myself photography, the term black photography did not exist. There were black photographers like Gordon Parks and so on and so forth, but there was no like realm within which like an aesthetic was made that encapsulated black people. And I spent nearly 7 years continuously away from the United States, not in any of this. Like most of the time I was in China, so I didn't have access to Instagram, didn't have access to a lot of the tools that we use here. I was just making my work, going about my life. And to come back here and, work with galleries and within institutions and whatnot, it's been interesting to see and to hear, quite frankly, people kind of make this push towards like censoring people of color and, LGBTQ people and everything, but still like almost inadvertently or maybe on purpose create an entire genre that is racist unto itself or identitarian unto itself. In my opinion, that fits with image suppression because it's siloed. It's siloed, and also like, I don't think Gordon Parks is trying to be the best like black photographer. I think he was just trying to be the best photographer. And I think it sucks that I'm 32 years old. I don't really give a shit about any of this, but it sucks that now you have people who are kind of coming up, studying in school or what have you, thinking that they have to make black skin look the blackest it can look. think that like the hair has to look a certain way, to think that, you know, all these markers have to be met, quite frankly, for white people who don't know what blackness is in the first place, you know, or whatever you identify as is in the first place. You know, I think that's rather troubling. And I think that like we, like photographers in general, should just think about what will happen 50 years from now when, if Google or whatever search engine is around, when they chat GPT or whatever, you know, black photography or trans photography, how much of the index will just look the same, and how the monolith that we fought so much, that our ancestors fought so much against, will have been achieved. So that's one thing. But in terms of a crisis, you know, throughout my work, I mean, as an example, when I landed in China in 2014, I first landed in Hong Kong, so not quite China, but I landed in Hong Kong, and literally the night that I landed, the Chinese government shut down internet, access to Western internet in Hong Kong. I remember literally reaching out to my family members and Gmail just going dark. You know, as someone who had never been outside of New York, outside of the tri-state area, it was extremely jarring. And, you know, of course I soldiered on and started to live in this place that, you know, is easily the most authoritarian place I've ever lived in my life, and began to see that, you know, early on began to see that there was crises happening all over the country, whether it be the Uyghur crisis in Xinjiang, you know, the Chinese Muslims, you know, whether it be the Rohingya crisis that was bubbling in Myanmar, or the stock market crash that was impending. All this happened during my time there, but the government worked really hard to make sure that no one noticed it. And they did this through emphasizing community, which I thought was ironic, you know, because in China, there's a one China dream, and everyone is committed to that dream. So that's one thing. The dream is to ensure that China lives on for generations. China's been around for 5,000 years. It will continue to be here. It is the center of the world, and we will make sure that it remains the center of the world. And 85% of the people, maybe 95% of the people agree with this, because no country has brought more people out of poverty in the last 40 years than China, and that's a fact. You know, as much as I don't want to give them that that credence, you know. But so that's one thing. But when I left Asia and began my travel back to the West, you know, I made stops in places like Morocco, you know, in southern Italy, which at that time was going through a immigration crisis, and shot a project on refugee and asylum seekers while I was out there. And one of the things that I found so interesting, well, in hindsight, that I find so interesting about it, is that at the time they were in a liminal space, waiting to see if they could live in this country or not. And, you know, fast forward to me returning to the United States and the pandemic happening, the lockdowns happening, I found another liminal space, in the sense of like people were isolated, not the same, but much like refugees, but in their home, in the comfort, quote unquote, of their own homes. They're isolated, no community, no recourse. We don't know when this thing is going to end. And one of the things I told one of my family members was, well, now we're all going to see how the rest of the world lives. We're all going to like experience that now. And I think it's safe to say that we didn't quite learn our lesson from it. But for me at least, I began to think that, you know, in times of crisis, all this arbitrary shit, money, you know, status, class, all those things, on the surface they matter, sure. You know, there are people who went on super yachts and avoided all this shit or whatever, but are they really like free? You know, like they're just like siloed and trapped in some bullshit, honestly. And the only thing, and the first thing that I told myself when the lockdown happened was, well, this is a time to invest in myself and invest in people. And I think that's what we're supposed to do in crisis. You have to invest in yourself. Even what a government is supposed to do, like, I mean, if you look at the 20th century, you know, when shit was really hitting the fan from the Depression in the United States, what did like the social gospel and FDR and them do? They said, okay, you know, unfortunately, all these white people, we're going to make sure that they get the equivalent of 100 grand, and we're going to start a new economy because they had to. And for whatever reason, I mean, some would argue because of neoliberalism, that is not the case. And we are suffering more for it today. So now we are in perpetual crisis that mirrors the crisis of financial institutions that were supposed to be too big to fail, you know. So that I say all that to say, like, we have to look within ourselves first and find the strength within ourselves, which is difficult. And like Sam was saying, like, some people will try to do exercise, will try to get therapy, will try to do all these things. Well, these things cost money. All you can really do is try to be whatever philosophy you grew up in, try to be the best of what that made you, and try to push forward and bring those who agree or are amenable along with you. So that's my piece.
Hello. Well, yeah, I'm like, I can say a little bit, but lately, you know, I like Buddhist teaching, and one of the big things is like suffering is linked to desire. Desire is suffering. So I try to reflect on that. And funny enough, recently I was reading a book by Haruki Murakami called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And the foreword to that is suffering is optional. And he said the runner's mantra is pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It's how much are you willing to withstand? What are you going to tolerate when it comes to that suffering? I've been thinking a lot about that stuff too lately. Like, we live in a society that pushes pleasure on us, like cheap pleasures. You know, quantized likes and clicks, metrics, all this shit that's supposed to make you feel good. And like, it's, you know, you're hungry, click a button. You're looking for a date, click a button. You want a fucking new pair of shoes, click the button. Like, click a button and receive pleasure, receive these cheap thrills, you know, because there are plenty, and if you got the capital or the time, you can have them. But you're in a constant state of falling down from the pleasure of the up. You know, your body wants to be in this homeostasis, and when you're constantly chasing these cheap pleasures and you're constantly having to fall down, you want to go back up again. But I've been thinking more and more, and I've read a lot of stuff about pain, and pain is a teacher, and pain is everything. Like, we should be, and not in the physical sense that you have to chase physical pain. Some people receive joy from physical pain, of course, but you should be doing things that are like anything that you struggle, like your body is resistant to. So say working out, going to the gym, learning a language, learning an instrument, anything that is painful that requires your focus and for you to like set aside time, and it's like hard. These painful things afterward tend to have rewarding feelings where your body is going to bring you back up again to homeostasis. So like, people do ice baths. That's a very painful thing to sit in ice, but it's good for your skin and it's actually good for like depression and shit. Like, take a cold shower. Like, that's painful, but just do it and see how you feel afterward. Like, sit in that fucking cold water and watch how exhilarating you feel. It's been said that it helps with depression, really. Like, taking a cold fucking shower, when you get out of there, it'll shake you up. It's good for your skin, it's good for your hair, it's good for your head, you know, and those painful things, like, again, I really have been reflecting that, like, again, pain is the teacher, and we should be looking to do the things that are painful and hard instead of chasing cheap pleasures. That's it. Like, and understand that pain is a teacher. Even when you go through grievances and loss and breakups, those are teachers. It teaches you shit. On the other side, you come out and you're like, I learned something from this painful, uncomfortable, shitty thing, you know. And you don't grow unless you go through like discomfort and stuff like that. Like, you have to put yourself, You have to put yourself out there and put yourself in the line of fire and do things that you're uncomfortable with at the end of the day. Like that's how we get on with it, you know? But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I mean, it brings up kind of like, and I think it ties into what Joey was saying about the problem with the identitarian sort of nature of culture right now. And I do think that we're in a turning point. I think it was particularly bad, like, starting like 10 years ago. And by that I mean, yeah, like this is what this identity is, and all of the people who fit under that category are monolithic, and deviating from that is like a betrayal of the culture, of that culture, or like speaking to an experience outside of yours is like, you know, stay in your lane. Like that was like a huge thing in like 2014, 15, 16. Oh man, I lost my train of thought. There was something that you just said that really spoke to me. Oh yeah, putting yourself outside your comfort zone. I think that, you know, I mean, we talk about this all the time in this space, but like really difference actually being the way that we find unity, like being like, actually it's like really important to like to speak out about stuff, as opposed to like staying in your lane, not, you know, like it's such a catch-22 because people don't want you to speak on something that isn't your experience, but then like get upset when you don't like speak out about like injustice. And I think that you know, what Joey said is really resonates, which is also like a line from one of my favorite TV shows, which is Penny Dreadful, where like there's like a scene where this woman is she's like possessed, and she's like experienced all of this trauma from like the medical system. It's like based in the late 1800s, and it's Ava Green, and she's, you know, her friends are like holding her down on the bed because she's like scratching at herself, and they're just like, oh my god, like, and she's like begging them to like kill her, and it's like super emotional. And then, you know, eventually she gets sort of like released from what's happening to her, and at the end of the episode, her sort of father figure says, like, you know, the only people we have are the people we trust. Like the only thing we have are the people we trust. And I think that is this like remedy or like medicine to siloed identitarianism and like fear of being uncomfortable, is like finding unity across difference, like with feeling. It's like so many people across difference feel disillusioned by the structures, and if you were able to find those people, like that's where social rupture can happen. It's like, oh, like for instance during like Occupy, you know, like there were all of these people who all of a sudden were feeling like the effects of the economic crisis for like, yeah, the first time. And some people were like, well, you're just experiencing this. But there was this huge social rupture because across difference, people were able to like be like, oh shit, like this is, yeah, we're all fucked. Same with like, you know, what was happening in Detroit and Chicago with the Rainbow Coalition and like people coming together, Huey Newton saying, oh, I went to this like white ghetto and I'd never seen white people living like this. I had no idea that like, you know, these Appalachian migrants in Chicago were living like this and dealing with the cops in different but similar ways, and like maybe this is a point of unity. So I think that this sort of idea of using like affect and like feeling of disillusionment and like discomfort as actually like a point of building is really powerful.
Two things on that. So to your point about pain, you know, I don't really know how, I can't really recall how it came to me, but you know, I grew up in the foster care system, for example. You know, I was constantly displaced, placed with different families, all the way up until my adoption. And one of the things I used to tell myself, I guess to be at peace with things, was, you know, one day I'm going to turn 18, you know, all this shit that I went through is going to like inform my adult life and make me invincible. That was my thought back then, you know? That was the thought. Yeah, it didn't turn out that way, but that was a thought. And, you know, to the point of learning through pain, basically learning through pain, like that's what all this is. That's what all this has been, I think, in our experience that has gotten all of us to where we are today. You know, we have all experienced trauma. We have all, I mean, like we put tattoos on our bodies. We do all kinds of things. We have experienced so much trauma, and it wasn't until like I found myself in a completely near-death experience that I realized, like, oh shit, I have reached like the lowest I can go, and you know there is so much more to life than all this shit that I've been broadcasted for a long time, you know. And furthermore, like, you know, in so much of philosophy, especially in the age of from the age of antiquity, you know, I used to always question, like, why are people like Marcus Aurelius or whatever, these people who were literally going to war, just like saying, like, okay, like, yeah, all these people are dying, all these things are happening, all these plagues are happening, but we have to be invested in humanity, we have to be invested in moving forward, because this is what humans do, we survive. So just a thought that I had on that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing in that book, Culture of Narcissism. It was like written in the 70s, and they talk about how earlier on, I don't know the years, like a long time ago, like people wanted their family name to live on. And like that was kind of what you're saying, like this whole, how do we live on, how do we live on? And now what's happening is, you know, then basically in the 60s, everyone was doing drugs, free love, all this stuff. In the 70s, everyone was so damaged, they're retreating to the mountains, like yoga, all that shit. But now we have such this like doomsday mentality that people don't really even care about their family name, for instance. They're just like, oh, the world is ending. Like, yeah, and it's like everyone's just kind of looking at themselves and like caring about themselves. So it's like this like age of individualism. And I feel like this is a good time to well, hold on. So I just wanted to plug in something that Sadie, who is part of Radio Bonita and Uncensored New York, and she does the satellite station in Mexico City, and she's been talking a lot about like ideology that doesn't blame, which I think is really interesting, and saying the doomsday mentality is distracting us and like focusing on the negative rather than the positive. Is just something that I've been thinking a lot about. And then also, do you want to say anything? Like about meditation and like, I don't know, you went through, we're here with Johnny Scudo, he's part of Uncensored New York. His music project is Death Dance Music. And, you know, a big part of Uncensored is his experience and what he went through, and all of that alienation. Like the reason we're focused so much on people that are alienated and not having a community is because of his experience that was, you know, really terrible. But I wanted to talk to him about just the things that he was able to do that helped him like through all of a crisis.
Hi, I'm Johnny. So, yeah, you know, I went through a doxing situation during the pandemic in like 2000, early pandemic, so 2001. And my strength was mostly just kind of trying to keep myself around, you know, positive people. Thankfully, I had like a girlfriend who cared for me and was, you know, very understanding and listened to me. But for people who are going through that, I feel like accepting the fact that, you know, this is like outside of your control. You know, it's a lot of accepting the fact that, like, you know, you can't control this situation. Like, I'm repeating myself. But at the same time, like when I was going through it, you know, we were going through a pandemic. I was inside all the time. I was, you know, there was nowhere for me to go. There was nobody for me to talk to in person. So it was like extra traumatic because we were so isolated at that point. But I want to talk more about like the things that helped me get through that situation, which were early on were meditation. I'm in AA, I'm sober, which is something that they tried to take away from me as well. I started getting like kicked out of meetings, AA meetings and NA meetings that you know, these people attended, which was like, you know, they were preaching, you know, I hope you get the help you need, but at the same time, they were trying to kick me out of one place I get my help. So I think solution was probably meditation early on, you know, even if it's like 5 or 10 minutes a day, that was something that really helped me. Also, Sam said something about like being outcasted. I've always been outcasted or been somewhat of an outcast, like on the fringes of, you know, society, and not because I wanted to be that way, it's just the way my reality kind of presented itself. So it wasn't really anything that new to me, being completely ostracized from society, because I kind of have always been somewhat ostracized, and most of the people I surround myself with have been too. But I think that the solution was to kind of meditate, not do drugs, not drink.
Can you talk a little bit about AA and like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Like, what do you mean?
Like how the support that you get within those programs and like the kinds of people that are there and your experience not being able to share?
Well, I think that I was experiencing a lot of pushback from people in meetings because, you know, they labeled me like, you know, unsafe, or, you know, he's an abuser, he's that. You know, I don't hold any of these labels onto myself, neither do I think that I am one of these types of people that they labeled me. But yeah, it was complicated because I was getting, you know, I would be in a Zoom meeting, and, you know, because this was during the pandemic, early on in the pandemic, I would be on a Zoom meeting and somebody would say, like, you know, there's an abuser here, or there's this person here, and, you know, then I would be told to not come back to that meeting. Meantime, you know, if you're in NA or AA, you know, it's like I'm there for help, you know, and, you know, these people are saying, yeah, I hope he gets the help he needs, you know, these people who tried to dox me. Like I said before, I'm repeating myself again, but what was I gonna say? I'm there with people need to get help, but I'm also there with people who have been drug dealers, been murderers, who've been fucking, you know, incarcerated for 10, 15 years, like just real, you know, psychotic motherfuckers that need help, that are coming there to get the help that they fucking need. And a lot of the men, especially who were in AA at the time, were getting, you know, they oh, this person's making me uncomfortable. It's like, well, this guy was just in prison for, you know, 6 or 7 years, you know. That's a problem if you're trying to go through recovery. You know, we were all there to get help, you know.
Yeah, totally. And AA is a free service too, you know. That's something that you can go to get support that doesn't cost money. So that's sort of why I wanted to, yeah.
Shall we phone?
Yeah. Let's call
I'll
Josh.
do that right now. Let me. Here we go. And I'm gonna put him on speakerphone with this mic, and Sam, you can speak to him. Yo, so I have you on the speaker here, and I'm amped. I have it up on the it's coming through the PA here. So Sam, see if you can hear Sam when she says hello.
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 Yeah, we lost the iPhone cable, but I think that this will work.
Cool. Yeah, I can kind of hear you guys.
What's going on?
Not much. Am I echoing a bunch because I have the volume up on my laptop?
Yeah, we lost the iPhone cable. Oh, yeah, we have
You're getting a delay through if you.
Okay, I turned you guys down on the laptop.
Yeah, or just put on you put on headphones or something.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what's going on?
Oh, yeah, shout out Joey, your photography is awesome. Shout out Sam and Uncensored. You guys are doing something awesome here. I'm loving this entire conversation I've heard so far. And shout out Eric, happy birthday, brother.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you.
Love you as well.
Yes.
So like on these topics, yeah, Johnny made a lot of good points about the feelings of being ostracized and how difficult it can be to get help when you feel like you need it. The thing is, it's like these harassment campaigns, they sort of come in waves, and not necessarily foreseeable. And in that, sorry, just jumping to the first topic I can recall back to. God, there were so many good points here made today. I guess with my crisis, it was similar to Johnny's in the sense that, I was ostracized from my musical community. I did a lot of community organizing in terms of like live music and things like that. And, before you know it, you're sort of excommunicated based on shadowy, blurry, vague accusations of harm causing. And it becomes really hard to even figure out how to approach your own situation at that point. All you can really know and do is that you are losing touch and losing contact with the people that you had sort of banked on being around. And after they're gone, you have to keep living. I've been on the verge of suicidality. I know how that feels to, be completely alone and have no idea what to do with yourself. But getting into, some things that Eric brought up, the pain can teach you so much. It's such a great teacher, and it can really change your life to begin to invest in things that are uncomfortable and difficult, that can instill a sense of discipline in you, keep your hands busy. I started working in construction, and, it's just like every day I was like swinging hammer, carrying shit, and just thinking about my life. And to the person who was sitting just next to Eric a while back, he was mentioning interacting with people with different perspectives than you. I think that that's incredibly important in surviving a crisis, because one of the most important things you can realize is that the world is so much bigger than this. It's so much larger and more vast than whatever social past you find yourself in or your scene. It extends so much larger than that, and
Yeah,
it's incredibly sobering to realize how many other perspectives there are out there, and like corporations are going to go this hyper-identitarian route, and a lot of the people in these scenes are going to go this hyper-identitarian route. I don't think it's going to last forever, particularly with just the fact that this artistic community exists. Says something positive to me about the way things are heading. And it's just another reason why I think what you guys are doing is so good.
Yeah,
Another
go ahead, keep going. Sorry.
okay. Another thing I'll say that is important to remember when you're facing a crisis like this, where you're losing all these people and you will be full of resentment at a certain point, is that resentment is like a hot coal, and it will burn the hand of the person who holds it. Even if you want to throw it at someone else, it still has to burn your hand first. So it's important to try and let that go.
Well, that's a
and a lot of this-
great analogy. You know, the hot coal. You know, it's like I feel like
Thanks.
that's. I mean,
a
it's
friend
just,
told me that once, and I asked him who said it, and he said, "I told you that."
Who said it?
Drew said it.
oh, Drew, yeah.
Yeah, so he was reading a lot of like Buddhist text at that time, and he told me that, and it blew my mind, and I've never let it go since.
Sounds like some Thich Nhat Hanh.
Another thing is, you're not the sum of your consumption. You are so much more than the identity that you've built around the things that you've consumed and the people that you've surrounded yourself by. The only constant is change, and you have to like embrace the fact that you can change and grow in any way you choose.
Yeah.
Because people can and do change.
Yeah, I think it like evolved, you know, like there, you know, for my situation, like the campaign too, like, or the people that came after me, I think like my, you know, I listened to the Clementine Morgan's thing a couple of days ago with Michael Imperioli, and he had some really good stuff to say that it was like, you know, I'm not frozen 25 years ago and still the same person I am
Absolutely.
25 years ago today. You know, my personality.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it seems like, unfortunately, the internet has created this, like, kind of like ice box of your personality. And, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you're,
Yeah.
you know, you're this person for the next 20 years until the internet implodes, you know? Because we said so and it's permanent, you know? And people evolve, people change. And not saying most of the stuff that was said about me like is completely like just slanderous, but regardless of it being slanderous, it's like it's frozen there, you know what I mean? And like that's something that, you know, you have to evolve from. It kind of puts you in this like weird, I call it brain jail. And that's something that I've been having to just personally work away from, putting myself in that kind of like mental prison, because that's kind of what those things do. They put you in like a scary, just mental, you know, you're mentally incarcerated. I don't know.
I think that one of the important things of being able to live your life offline and touch grass, so to speak, is that, you know, you're in an environment where hypocrisy is everywhere, online and offline. But at least if hypocrisy is everywhere, it is like the human element of hypocrisy that you're experiencing in real time. And that kind of thing, you can see it, absorb it, recognize what it is, and you can choose to forgive it and let it go right in that moment. And you both can change together from that experience, as opposed to being online surrounded by constant diatribes and like self-righteous monologues about the way things are and the way you always will be, you know, for the sake of signaling your virtues and whatnot. I think it's much better to keep things in a discussion type format in regards to stuff like that, you know, because you have the opportunity to grow and change right there on the spot, as opposed to like make some grand declaration and then have to battle with it. You know,
And it's like, this is kind of that conversation right now. You know, this is that dialogue. You know, most people can't even have this conversation. You know, especially people who kind of like are contestants in that, you know, kind of culture, that doxing culture. You know, it's hard for them to have that conversation or this type of conversation. From my experience, you know, in person, it's literally impossible.
Right, and you know, and like another thing is like, you can't let these people like run your mind. You know, you can't let that resentment turn into like a a complete takeover of your attention, like Diamanda Gala said, she's like, I don't have the fucking time to psychoanalyze every person that crosses me, or, just so I can incur their wrath or their humor or whatever it is, like to entertain somebody's projection onto you. You don't have time for that.
No,
I think what ends up working better is these kind of moments where you both get to say something, learn something from it, and move on to the next thing.
yeah, and also like I think that like as being part of Uncensored with Sam, I feel like we've been very open to like discussion with these types of people, and also like, hey, I might not be allowed at their facility or what they would consider a safe space or their bar, but they're more than welcome to come here. I would never, and she would never detest or turn away anybody. Even if they came after me, I wouldn't. I might be a little uncomfortable. They might be uncomfortable. Not necessarily saying that they would come here, but if they did, I would be playing the same game they would be playing if I was to say you have to leave, And that's like maybe by them coming, that would start a conversation in a more positive, like, direction for our culture,
Yeah, you have to be able to be compassionate, because that is what their movement seems to be lacking. It's a movement that claims to be, pro restorative justice, but the actions that they take tend to lean towards punitive justice. It always tends to be very punitive. And so I think that, if you want to have this new kind of life beyond that, you have to recognize that, like, everyone is going to fuck up.
Well, it's
Everyone
like, do you
shows
want to
their
be?
ass. There isn't a person that I know that doesn't.
Yeah, like, do you want to be restored back into that community? I mean, personally, like, restorative justice is like being like restored back into a community. Like, I would
Right.
rather, like, be burned alive than be restored back into that community at this point.
I mean, as fucked up as it sounds, at least in jail, you're guaranteed to eat and a place to stay, and then it's assumed that you're prepared to go back to society when you get out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. That's why I was saying brain jail, it puts you in this, like...
Yeah, like and sometimes with these things, it doesn't even have anything to do with any kind of real crime. It's more so public perception of you, like a branding and casting you out.
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, let's not give all the power to them here. I think it's important to,
I'm not giving. This isn't like a power. We're not trying to power play here with these types of people. I'm just the point that I was making is I think that it's important that we're open to dialogue. With people who are not, don't think the same way, you know what I mean? And that's the problem on their side, they don't want to necessarily have that conversation in person or online,
Mm-hmm. And as far as like, surviving this and finding yourself like something more supportive and moving on with your life, you can't lose if you don't play.
Yeah, no, and the restorative justice aspect of things, like I just said, like, it's like you have to choose what community you want to be restored back into. Like, in the end of the day, they didn't work. It didn't work out with the restorative justice. They just, told. It was a long story, but it didn't work out with these people on restorative justice, because I went as far as getting a restorative justice counselor for months to communicate with these people, and which inevitably, in the end of the day, I chose to, just was like, am I going to be let back into this community? And then, like, I'm going to be with these types of people who do this to other people? You know what I mean? Like, so that was, yeah, you could say something.
Josh, Ripley's joining us now to talk.
This is Ripley. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really interesting conversation, because there's actually a lot of like disagreement and dissent and criticism of restorative justice as a concept because of this idea. It's like, well, what are you restoring? Like, if you break a teapot, you can't. There's no going back, right? Like, which I think is also like an important there's actually a really good criticism of restorative justice that's an anonymous essay called "The Broken Teapot," which basically is a story about someone like trying to go through a process and then like still not being like not being able to resolve it. It's you can look it up online. It's like it's on like anarchist library and stuff, but I think it's interesting to kind of think about it more as this like transformative justice is the thing that's kind of that's emerged from the criticism of restorative justice, because it's like, well, we don't really want to restore because the relationship might not even be one that you want to pursue, or you might not want to return to the community that's like harmed you in the process of trying to like resolve harm. So
Agreed.
What if we like actually thought about transforming society in general? And that's where, things like full access to healthcare and mental health services and the abolition of like the police and the prison system, or like at least some sort of like restructuring of these systems becomes like more the central question, as opposed to making it like individual, placing the responsibility on the individual, which ultimately is like what austerity is all about, is like, oh, like we're gonna shut down social programs and make it so that like individuals have to deal with things on their own, which ultimately has led to like a lot of this alienation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to tie together what you and Johnny were both saying, I mean, what do you want to transform it into? Like I don't want to be restored into that community. I would much rather join this community that is I'm talking to right now. I mean, what you guys are doing is you're creating a brand new community, and I have a lot of respect for your willingness to bring together very different minds with each with their own goals and aspirations, but like one common vision of the future, which is that it won't exist without cooperative effort and being able to acknowledge these things about each other.
Totally, yeah.
I might have. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Another quote, actually, Johnny, I was listening to that Michael Imperioli thing too, and I think one of the best quotes from that he quoted from a Buddhist text was, "Would you rather be right or be free?" And I was thinking about that, whereas I was, in terms of like wanting to argue your way back in, or like, kick against the pricks, so to speak, like, is it really worth it? Like, would you rather be right against these, winning a battle to win what? It's like getting kicked out of a bar, like,
Well, it's like
you're
being
not
80.
welcome there.
It's
What's
like
the point in just fighting back the whole time,
Yeah, it's like 86th out of heaven.
Yeah.
Kicking against the pricks is in the Bible. It's also a Nick Cave record. That's why I'm bringing up the heaven.
Yeah, the Nick Cave. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that like the media does a really good job at showing the most fringe people on both sides, and I think there are more people in the middle that have forgiveness in their heart and are willing to know that like that big corporate whatever capitalist America business model is trying to flatten the human experience, and we've gotten away from just acceptance of like people are being human is to make error, like, or however, but it's we like you said, you can't get hung up on petty differences and sit there and like waste your time trying to argue your way back into the bar, but I just think that we are being kind of shown the most extremes on both sides, and that includes a lot of the cancel culture and stuff like that that's come up, and you have found us here, and there are people that are around that will accept you, and no matter what, and pardon any kind of error or something or misjudgment or whatever the hell it is,
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I also think that it's important to remember that virtual reality and analog reality, they only become the same thing when you spend too much time in virtual reality. This whole simulation theory, it all feels like people that have let their frame of reference become nothing but virtual reality. Real life is so much less and more forgiving, and so it has so many more dimensions to it. And it's just important to be cognizant of that in your daily life, and recognize that somebody is just a phone call away, and nature isn't too far. You can get there, and you can go there and realize how much more overwhelming and dangerous and powerful and transformative it is than any BuzzFeed article or infographic repost on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
for
change it.
sure. No, I agree with all that stuff, like the BuzzFeed type of stuff. But what I thought was really important, and something that Sam and I recently realized, and a few other people, is that there's not many resources for this type of stuff. Like you can't call a crisis hotline for doxing. And you can. Yes, the person doesn't have that experience most of the time. Like, you can call a hotline, but most of the time it's like, I was sexually assaulted at work, which is great. Like, it's great you could call a hotline for that. But at the same time, there's also they don't know what to do when you call and say, I just got fired from work because they say that I sexually assaulted somebody. There's nothing, they don't know what to say. They're like, yeah, so, we can't really help you in that field. You're going to have to figure out what to do, which I think is really interesting, and something that Sam and I have recently came across from just dealing with something recently that happened to somebody, a doxing situation, and they didn't know what to say.
Most attempts at mediation tend to be run by a party that is not neutral, and therefore, at least in my case, a lot of attempts at mediation always fell through because it wasn't necessarily in the best interest to hear both, publicly in the best interest to hear both parties. So, I think that I think that if there are going to be things like that are put into place, that people would have to be a little bit more thoughtful and logical about it. I don't have any real. I haven't come up with a plan of any sort of my own in regards to mediation. With me, it's like I'll try to talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, then we don't have to. I can't control anything besides myself, and I just have to take it from there.
Yeah, we just thought it was really kind of crazy that it didn't exist, because it's happened, this type of situation. And it's not saying that, obviously people are harassed or sexually harassed all the time, but there's also people who don't do that and are accused. And there's no place for them to have that conversation or have that sort of resource to call if they're in crisis. Or they could call a friend, but at the same time, there's all these resources for people who've been through sexual assault or sexual harassment. So yeah.
Yeah, it's when it comes down to optics, which most things are these days. I think it can be pretty difficult to find, this kind of devil's advocate character in the public eye.
Yeah, public or not, I just feel like having mediation, having someone that can mediate and give empathy to both people would solve a lot.
I agree.
But yeah, I feel like we're about at an hour. And I don't really have anything else to say. Naomi Haran is next, but yeah.
Ripley's gonna read something here.
Okay, this is. Hi, Josh. This is an excerpt from The Broken Teapot, which I had mentioned. I can place it in the chat as well. Through much soul searching, I've concluded that I was wrong to believe in, participate, and perpetuate accountability processes. This anthology is part of my amends. Since this break point, I have started to try and challenge accountability processes, but even at a theoretical level, this gets falsely categorized as blaming the victim. To question accountability is to question the sex-positive culture of consent we have all worked so hard to create. When did these things get so tangled together? There's a can't win for losing mentality to this discussion. If you don't believe anymore, you can't care about violence, assault, or abuse. To question is to betray. Instead of embracing the honest conflict, we hide our true feeling under so many layers of mental gymnastics and doublespeak. If these algorithms also feel wrong to you, trust those feelings and say something. We are also afraid to speak our minds, lest we be judged to be on the wrong side of the fucked up and not fucked up dichotomy. Adjunctification requires such stark differentiation. This is always a price when you are asked to sit in judgment. Be sure you are willing to pay it. It usually comes later in the form of futile prayers that no one will ever discover or prosecute your own faults. Regardless of how others feel, I know the jury is already in. I know myself to sometimes be fucked up. It's taken a long time, but I am finally comfortable with my contradictions and the slow progress to be made in changing them. I want friends and lovers who are also comfortable with those disjunctures. I don't want to be comrades with whoever pretends such imperfections don't exist or condemn me for them.
That's awesome. I definitely want to read that full thing. When did that come out?
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, came out in 2012.
Oh shit. Okay.
Wow.
Just really quickly to wrap up, also like what Ripley just read. Yeah, the accountability thing. I feel like after I had taken like accountability on the internet, you know, was kind of pretty much just everybody said you have to apologize. I wanted to pull my feet from the fire, knowing that like a lot of the things that were said were, you know, that was their experience. That wasn't my experience. I looked at it as like, you know, a lot of falsities, but I just wanted my feet pulled away from that fire. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go online and write this. And my life became like a living hell for the next, 2 years. Work, harassment, like, and the thing is, like, I look at it now and it's like, it's really, I'm not trying to be like, woe is me, but online accountability, I feel like, is just not good. And
it's because accountability isn't the purpose. Like, responsibility just doesn't seem like the purpose. Like, it doesn't seem like a movement that's based around justice as much as it is power. It makes me sound kind of bitter to say that, but I just think that the way that people kind of go about that stuff is usually a little wrong, and I think that everybody could use a little more actual conversation.
Yeah.
At the end of the
It's
day.
just everybody usually is saying to me, or a lot of people I was around, like, I'm going to take accountability online for X, Y, and Z, even though I didn't do it, just to, like, not have myself, like, be presented in this way online. And their life was, destroyed even more so after they did it, after they went online and were like, I'm sorry for X, Y, and Z. They just buried themselves even further, and people came after them even harder.
Yeah.
People love to, they attack. If you're wounded, they'll attack.
Yeah, if there's
more.
blood in the in the water,
Yeah.
more sharks are gonna come.
They love to kick a wounded person. Sam's gonna end with something.
I'm going to end with something that Sadie wrote. And I think this is really positive. Okay, there we go. Rejecting systems of censorship that hide under the guise of free expression. Truth has been commodified and marketed to us like fashion trends. Just like there's no fake news, there's no real news. Sorry, my notes are a bit messed up. She urges people to question everything, embrace complexity, follow your intuition, and free yourself from comparison, categories, and reason. I want to end on that.
All right,
That was great.
Josh.
Coming up in like 5 minutes, we'll have Naomi. Thank you so much, Josh,
Josh,
for
thank
calling
you,
in.
thank you for thanks for being on this, man.
Thanks for being
Thanks
part
for
of the
having me, man. I'll
Discord.
come back anytime you want.
Looking forward to meeting you.
Same here.
Okay.
Same here for sure.
All right,
Bye.
talk to you soon. Bye.
Talk to you soon. Peace.